people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. It's official. It appears that Spain's own former EBU super bantamweight champion Mary Romero is making a move downstairs to bantamweight, and she's going to be taking on Turkey's own Cetin,
an unbeaten up-and-comer that may be flying low on the radar, at least in this part of the world.
But having reviewed the footage of Cetin in action, this is definitely a young unbeaten fighter to watch out for, and another testament to just how deep the talent pool is, anywhere in between 118 and 122 pounds.
Mary Romero is going to have her hands full.
She is, sporting a professional record of 8 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 11 professional contests, 11 professional bouts. We know what
By now, we know what Mary Romero's calling card is, and we know what she's all about. She's a pressure fighter, albeit a very frenzied, uncoordinated pressure fighter. That's what she does, and it just so happens that pressure
fighting seems to be Cetin's calling card as well. She's a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, a body puncher, a rather educated one.
Sporting a professional record of 10 wins with no losses, no draws, 7 knockouts.
Just about as many fights as Mary Romero, coming off of an impressive 4th-round TKO stoppage win over former champion Eva Voraberger.
Cetin debuted as a professional in April of 2018. She's boxed approximately 10 times since then.
25 years old, approximately 12 years younger than the former EBU champion of Spain, Mary Romero.
Cetin was last in action in May of last year. It was the only fight that she had last year, the Eva Voraberger fight, whereas Mary Romero,
she was a little bit more active last year. She fought two times. Once against unbeaten Maria Secchi in May, won a points decision, and again in October, opposite the ring, Ellie Scottney. I remember in the Scottney versus Romero fight, Ellie Scottney didn't spend the fight trying to create space between herself and Mary. She stayed with her, getting body shots in there every so often. And that effectively took the air out of the tires for Mary Romero. It just so happens
Cetin is a bit of a body puncher herself, a spiteful one.
More spiteful, I'd say, than Ellie Scottney.
Ellie really is one of the best unbeaten up-and-comers anywhere at or around these weights, but she's not a big puncher.
Cetin is.
She's racked up 7 knockouts in 10 professional contests.
She's not the boxer that Ellie Scottney is. Doesn't have Ellie's form and finesse, but she is a strong puncher.
A body puncher.
Last year in the Eva Voraberger fight, it was the body punches that did Eva Voraberger in.
As stated, I recall in the Ellie Scottney versus Mary Romero fight, Ellie Scottney,
she was sneaking in body shots in there every so often, and that effectively took the air out of the tires for Mary Romero.
Mary Romero, who's a pressure fighter, the same way that Cetin is a pressure fighter, but she's a lot more crude.
She doesn't exhibit the same form, the same punch picking, the same accuracy that Cetin does. Mary's approach is so frenzied when closing the distance, it can result in head clashes and clinches.
Get all wrapped up in the other girl's arms.
Gets all wrapped up trying to close the distance. She doesn't spend much time thinking about what she's going to do when she gets there, aside from throw uncoordinated flurries.
Mary's got her virtues. She's a tough girl with a good engine, good power.
But in terms of form and finesse, the delivery system for that power, she's still very raw, very crude.
Cetin is more refined.
Her punch picking compared to Mary's is more accurate,
thereby more devastating, making sure that not only does the punch land, it lands clean, does optimal damage.
Left hook to the body is a strong punch for Cetin. She really knows how to get it in there, just under the elbow.
Whereas Mary's more of a brawler, a mauler, a scrapper.
It makes her awkward, and for a pure boxer, that can create a very frustrating situation when you need room to work and Mary won't give you that room.
Makes it difficult for a pure boxer, but not a pressure fighter, least of all one with firepower of their own.
When you have pressure fighter versus pressure fighter, you've essentially got two fighters that are going to fight fire with fire.
Makes for an all-action shootout.
Now, Mary Romero has beaten a number of unbeaten fighters before. Unbeaten Amy Timlin, unbeaten Maria Cetin.
She faltered at the hands of unbeaten Ellie Scottney. Will she falter at the hands of unbeaten Cetin?
I think she might. As stated, I noticed in the Scottney fight, the body punches, she wasn't wearing those well.
Ellie made sure to go there every so often, and Cetin, she's a rather accomplished body puncher as well.
Tack on that Mary Romero is coming right off a loss to Ellie Scottney, and she's 12 years older than Cetin, that she's moving down in weight for this fight. The Scottney fight was up there at 122. This fight is at 118.
The winner of the fight becomes the mandatory challenger for Mexico's own WBC champion, Yuli Hangaluna, who was in action this past weekend.
Once again, successfully defending her WBC title at 118 pounds. This is a fight of some significance.
Slight edge to Cetin.
The younger and fresher fighter with firepower of her own that might keep Mary Romero honest.
She might stop her.
If she can get a few of those signature left hooks in there, I don't think Mary Romero is going to wear them well.
And this fight is set to go down in Turkey, Cetin's neck of the woods. She'll have home field advantage.
I like Turkey's own Cetin to win the fight and become the mandatory challenger to Yuli Hangaluna late next month.
In men's heavyweight news, Whyte appears to have caught wind of Jarrell Miller's knockout of Lucas Brown this past weekend. He gave a brutal assessment of Jarrell Miller. You know that I've always wanted to see these two guys fight?
I still do. Jarrell Miller stopped Lucas Brown in the 6th round of their very heavyweight contest in Dubai, but Whyte believes him to be no threat to the division. Miller's career has been stop and start since serving 2 bans for separate doping offenses, the first of which saw a world title shot and career high payday against Anthony Joshua disappear.
The second was ahead of what was supposed to be his top-ranked debut. That never materialized.
The fact Whyte tuned in to Jarrell Miller's fight with Lucas Brown, at least to me, services as an indicator that he may be eyeing that guy for a fight, even if he hasn't said as much yet.
He might be.
The fight with Lucas Brown wasn't picked up by any major platforms here in America. Here in America, it was shown by way of ProBox.
Fledgling platform that just got off the ground a few months ago.
Perhaps a little over a year ago. They haven't been around that long. In any event, it wasn't on DAZN, it wasn't on ESPN, it wasn't on Fox or Showtime or any major platforms here in America. I doubt it was on any major platforms in the United Kingdom.
It's the kind of fight you had to look for.
And that Whyte saw it is interesting. Jarrell Miller has served his time, served his bans, and since then, the Brooklyn native has fought 3 times. 2 wins in 2022, and the Brown victory has made it clear he wants world honors. The fight was a slugfest with the 43-year-old Brown.
Jarrell Miller overwhelmed him with his constant pressure and aggression. Tack on that the man weighed 333 pounds. You can imagine how physically taxing that must have been for a 43-year-old Lucas Brown having a guy that size bearing down on you.
Down on him. It was a slugfest. It was tantamount to a barroom brawl, but it was entertaining. And I think a fight with Whyte would have an even bigger profile and would turn out to be even more entertaining. Whyte can't presume to turn his nose up at Jarrell Miller on the premise of his anti-doping issues.
He's had anti-doping issues of his own.
Perhaps I am playing devil's advocate for Jarrell Miller, but being honest with you, I'm not above watching a fight between Jarrell Miller and Whyte.
What are you telling me? You're telling me that if they made that fight, you wouldn't watch it?
Could you imagine how entertaining the press conferences would be between Whyte and Jarrell Miller if the fight got made? Jarrell Miller is one of the better trash talkers in this generation of fighters. Whyte,
he reacted to Jarrell's performance by saying Miller is so shit.
Not the most graceful, but still effective. At least this past weekend, opposite the ring, Lucas Brown, would he be as effective opposite the ring, Whyte? Just the other day, I was talking about how Anthony Joshua versus Jarrell Miller, given the backdrop of their story, their history, that's a fight that could still get a lot of attention if you made it.
I don't think Anthony Joshua wants to do the guy any favors, but who's to say getting Jarrell Miller in the ring with Anthony Joshua is a favor?
Not if he knocks him him out, Jarrell Miller called out both Daniel Dubois and Anthony Joshua in the aftermath of the Lucas Brown fight, but Mahmoud Char entered the ring to try and set up a scrap.
That guy.
After Tyson Fury left him high and dry late last year, that may be a more realistic option for Big Baby currently. There has been talk of a fight with Whyte in the past, with Miller's co-promoter, Dimitri Salita, eager to pit the two against one another. Both big men have kickboxing backgrounds, are brawlers, and would deliver on the beef beforehand.
Now, where are all the bleeding hearts with their tiki torches and moral outrage to crucify Dimitri Salita?
Because he's working with Jarrell Miller. Two-time anti-doping offender Jarrell Miller. Where's their energy for Dimitri?
You know what energy I'm talking about. All the energy they keep on reserve for what's in Conor Benn's egg.
Is it really doping in the sport you're up in arms about, or are you just using this as an avenue to vilify Eddie Hearn for what most every other promoter is doing?
Oscar Valdez's adverse finding didn't stop Top Rank from working with him. Tyson Fury's Nendrolone.
Do you think Frank Warren is losing any sleep over that? Luis Ortiz got popped for banned substances 2 times, and no one's holding Al Heyman.
No one's looking to crucify him for it, for working with that guy.
So spare me your moral outrage when it comes to Conor Benn. It seems to me that doping in the sport only bothers you when it pertains to matchroom fighters.
I didn't see anybody up in arms that Lou DiBella was helping to promote Jean Pascal's last fight. Jean Pascal, who very recently tested positive for 4 banned substances.
He was in action last week opposite the ring. Michael Eifert. Seems that Father Time has caught up to him. Better still, I didn't see the angry mob gathering around Lou DiBella to point the finger at him.
Crucify him or burn him at the stake.
I'm just being honest. I'm not above watching a Jarrell Miller versus Dillian Whyte fight on the premise of Jarrell Miller's anti-doping issues. At the end of the day, those issues seem widespread.
The sport is rife with them.
Dillian Whyte himself can't presume to be above fighting Jarrell Miller on that premise because he's had anti-doping issues of his own. I happen to believe that Dillian Whyte...
He'd fight this guy.
I think he would. And it wouldn't be the first time that Dillian Whyte has shared the ring with a repeat offender when it comes to anti-doping. He fought Alexander Povetkin 2 times. Alexander got popped.
Don't you remember? He got popped on 2 separate occasions. The first was ahead of the Wilder fight. He tested positive for meldonium. Then again, ahead of the Bermain-Stavern fight, he tested positive for Osterin.
And Dillian Whyte still fought him. Voluntarily, I might add. He wasn't under orders to fight that guy. He wasn't obligated to do it. He chose to do it. And I think
he's at least playing with the idea of taking on Jarrell Miller.
And no, perhaps not next, but perhaps after next. We could be on the eve of Dillian Whyte's official announcement as to who he's going to be facing next. We might be. By the time that this video is uploaded, that announcement may have already been made.
Maybe.
But I'm just giving it to you straight because it's the only way I know how to give it to you. Dillian Whyte versus Jarrell Miller would put asses in the seats. Make no mistake.
It would.
And I'm not above watching it. I'm not going to apologize for that.
I feel like if Dillian Whyte really wanted to get this guy in the ring, he'd get Eddie Hearn to bring him on board.
If it's what Dillian Whyte wanted, and I'm sure that Jarrell Miller would be receptive to such a match.
Jarrell Miller wants Anthony Joshua, so does Dillian Whyte. Maybe you let these 2 guys fight for it.
And finally, ahead of his own fight with his old buddy Caleb Plant, David Benavidez says Canelo versus Ryder, that's a tune-up fight.
It's killing 2 birds with 1 stone, is what it is.
I myself don't deny that in many ways John Ryder, compared to the kind of guys Canelo normally fights, I myself don't deny that in some ways it's a tune-up fight, but he's also his mandatory challenger.
And he is coming back from an injury.
David Benavidez himself said as much. I feel like a lot of fans are mad about it, but it's a tune-up fight for him, said Benavidez to FightHype.com recently. He's coming back from an injury since suffering a controversial defeat at the hands of Callum Smith in 2019. Ryder has studied the ship. Reeling off 4 consecutive wins in 2022 in particular was Ryder's finest hour. To kick off his year, the 34-year-old registered a victory over Daniel Jacobs. Shortly after, Ryder parlayed that into another upset triumph over Zach Parker, netting him the WBO interim crown. Although the British native isn't viewed as the most technical 168-pounder around, after carefully checking out his resume, Benavidez is convinced that he will at least make Alvarez work. It's going to be a good fight, man.
Stylistically, it will be. A few boo birds aside, the stylistic matchup between John Ryder and Canelo Alvarez pits pressure fighter against boxer puncher.
Those are usually fan-friendly fights. fun fights to watch where there's no shortage of action, Eddie Hearn stated, Canelo decided money didn't matter. He wanted to deliver for his people on May 6th.
You know, because you don't make the money at the gate in Mexico that you could make north of the border in Las Vegas.
For me, Saul's last fights have been in Las Vegas, Hearn said during the aforementioned press conference, and the best fights, the greatest nights for me, although Vegas is amazing, is the stadium fights. We've seen him at the Alamo Dome, Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Dallas Cowboys, AT&T Stadium, 70,000, incredible. But this will beat them all. And the answer to your question is he decided that money didn't matter. He wanted to deliver for his people. Alvarez, 32, will fight in Mexico for the first time since November of 2011. The four-division champion stopped former IBF champion Kermit Cintrone in the 5th round of that bout at Monumental Plaza de Toros, a legendary bull ring in Mexico City.
And as stated, I do think of John Ryder as being a bit of a tune-up fight for Canelo Alvarez. The disconnect is that he wouldn't be a tune-up fight for everyone else. He wouldn't be a tune-up fight for Jermall Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, or David Benavidez.
For them, the name of John Ryder really would be one of the best names on their existing resumes.
So the fact that Canelo Alvarez is using a guy like that, a guy who's not just rated in the top 10, the top 5.
Top 5 in the division. That's what a Canelo Alvarez tune-up fight looks like.
I think the guy deserves some consideration, and guess what? If you don't...
You're in the minority anyway, pal. The majority of the paying public, the guys and gals that actually spend money to see boxing, they support Canelo Alvarez. That's why he does better numbers than everyone else. Thus, anyone criticizing him
is in the minority by default, the minority by proxy.
You hear these boo-birds bring up names like Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo as if those fighters, based on what they've done so far, deserve more consideration than Canelo Alvarez. Demetrius Andrade was coming off an injury ahead of the Desmond Nicholson fight.
He didn't fight a guy in the top 10, let alone the top 5.
But you're going to criticize Canelo Alvarez for fighting this guy.
Jermall Charlo's been out of action for close to 2 years now after having faced Juan Macias Montiel.
But you're going to criticize Canelo Alvarez for fighting this guy.
Are you stupid or something?
You must be. If nothing else, this services as a tune-up fight for Canelo Alvarez, who is coming off of hand surgery, and certainly
that warrants some consideration.
Some guys don't want to give him any, though in truth, they don't have to.
You're in the minority anyway, pal.
The majority of fight fans understand that Canelo Alvarez already paid the cost to be the boss. He's already fought in very, very big fights.
Unified an entire weight class in only 11 months.
And made it look easy, though if it really were that easy, someone else would have done it before Canelo Alvarez.
And no one did.
The convenient criticisms and knee-jerk reactions to Canelo Alvarez's upcoming fight with John Ryder often fall on deaf ears because the paying public understands.
The people that matter.
Of course, if you ain't paying to see boxing, your opinion on it really doesn't matter.
Who the fuck cares what you think?
The paying public understands that this allows Canelo to kill 2, maybe even 3 birds with one stone. Have a tune-up fight while you're coming off a surgery, take care of your mandatory challenger, and deliver for the hometown fans.
Give them a night to remember.